All right, everybody, strap in because we are going deep today.
Diving right in.
Yeah, really diving deep into this book.
Get into the pool.
Jesus' Rules for Life, a rational approach for red-pilled men. Just the title alone, right?
Yeah.
So we're going to try to see where these things connect.
It's an interesting one.
Yeah, it really is. It really is.
Very unique angle, this book.
It really is.
Not through just faith alone,
right.
but like logic and reason.
Yeah.
And even skepticism, which is, you don't see too much of that.
No, not really. Not with this topic.
Not with this topic.
So it's like trying to fit a square peg in a round hole, but somehow they make it work, you know? But before we get too far, like, what even is the red pill? For those who haven't heard that term, it can sound kind of mysterious.
Definitely. The book even touches on this in the intro.
Yeah.
It's like a way of looking at the world.
Okay.
And encouraging you to kind of question everything.
Okay.
To think for yourself, and specifically when it comes to societal norms.
Right, like...
Like an example. Have you ever felt like society pushes men to hide their emotions?
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Not really express yourself.
Right.
The red pill would say, like, hey, challenge that.
Okay.
Be authentic, express yourself.
Yeah.
That type of thing.
So is that where it connects with Jesus then? Because he was also challenging norms.
Exactly. That's what the book is arguing, that he was like someone who's taken the red pill.
Right.
He's constantly questioning authority, rocking the boat,
Yeah.
not afraid to shake things up a little bit.
Okay, so questioning assumptions, seeking truth, even it's uncomfortable, right?
Yeah.
But then it goes a step further
Yeah.
with the Beatitudes.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, those are supposed to be like guidelines for a good life.
Right.
Like, it's not really the first place I would go looking for red pill advice, you know?
You'd be surprised.
So.
Like the idea of, blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth.
Right.
They kind of throw out this traditional view of meekness as weakness, but they're suggesting it's more about finding contentment in your own efforts.
In yourself, yeah.
Not needing external validation
Yeah.
to define your success.
So, like, tuning out the noise of the rat race and kind of defining success on your own terms.
Exactly. And that kind of feeds right into the red pill's emphasis on self-reliance.
Right, like forging your own path, yeah.
Yeah, questioning expectations.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
It definitely makes you think, yeah, for sure.
How does that hit you?
It definitely makes you think.
Yeah.
It makes you think.
It's deep, man.
And then there's that other one, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled.
Yes.
And the book ties that directly to the red pill's pursuit of truth,
Yeah.
even when it's difficult.
Yeah.
Like, the truth will set you free, but it might be a bumpy road getting there.
It's going to be a journey.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not going to be easy.
No.
But the satisfaction comes from living in line with those hard-won truths. Not from, like, material wealth.
Right.
And social status. It's about your actions and your values aligning.
When no one's watching, yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
That's powerful stuff.
It is.
But then there's that, blessed are the poor in spirit.
Yeah, that one's interesting.
That one's where it took a turn.
It took a turn.
Like, okay, hold on a second.
This is where they go into the financial realm a little bit.
Okay.
They're suggesting that acknowledging your limitations
Okay.
and, like, honestly evaluating your mistakes
Right.
can actually put you on the right path
Okay.
to, like, being stable.
So financially, it's like approaching it with a certain humility, a willingness to learn and adapt,
Exactly.
as opposed to, like, I got it all figured out.
Ego.
Yeah.
That can be a downfall
Right.
for a lot of people.
I'll tell you, sure, for sure.
And that ties back into the whole self-awareness, personal growth,
Right, exactly.
which is a big part of the red pill philosophy as well.
Okay, I'm starting to see how they're connecting these dots here. A little bit, but now we got to talk about the elephant in the room, or should I say the miracle on the mount.
Yeah.
How does a book that's embracing this, like, rational, red-pilled approach even begin to explain Jesus walking on water?
You're right. That's where things get really interesting.
Yeah.
Instead of just blindly accepting these miracles as, like, these divine acts,
Right.
the book takes a more skeptical approach.
So are we saying he didn't?
Not necessarily.
What do
It's
you
more about just examining it
Okay.
through a critical lens.
Okay.
Like, take turning water into wine, for example. That was already in a vessel.
Okay.
What if it was actually grape juice?
Right.
Or some other drink that tasted like wine?
So just because the text says wine doesn't necessarily mean it was fermented.
Exactly.
Right.
Or, like, walking on water, maybe there was a sandbar.
Right. Right.
or the water was frozen.
Yeah.
They even point out that Matthew mentions Peter walking on the water, too.
Oh, right. It's about
handy.
questioning that traditional narrative.
Yeah. Exactly. Which, again, plays right into that red pill principle of seeking truth
Right.
through evidence.
So what about faith, then? Surely you can still believe in miracles.
Right.
Even if you're approaching this from this, like, red-pilled perspective.
Of course, you're right.
Okay.
It doesn't dismiss faith at all. It actually acknowledges that believing in miracles ultimately does come down to personal faith.
Okay, so you can be a rational, skeptical person and still have faith.
Absolutely.
Those two things aren't mutually exclusive.
Not at all.
Oh.
In fact, they even quote Jesus in the book.
Oh, really?
Saying, I am the way, the truth, and the life.
Right.
No one comes to the Father except through me.
And what does that mean? Yeah.
Yeah, what does that mean?
Right.
You know, it's really up to you to kind of wrestle with.
Yeah.
And come to your own conclusions about.
Okay, this is kind of blowing my mind, I'm not going to lie.
It is interesting stuff.
This is really interesting stuff.
It makes you think.
It really does make you think, yeah. But we haven't even touched on one of the big ones, which is love and masculinity.
Yeah.
How does that, especially through this red pill lens, play out in the modern world?
The modern world, that's the question.
We're going to find out after the break. Okay, so we're back. And honestly, I'm still thinking about that last bit.
A lot to unpack there.
There really is, yeah. But let's shift gears a little bit here and talk about love and masculinity.
Okay.
Because it feels like those are two things that are often like pitted against each other.
Yeah.
Especially in the red pill world, which tends to emphasize more traditional masculine traits.
Yeah. It's interesting because the book actually tackles that head on.
Really?
Yeah. It suggests that Jesus's teachings on love, when you really dig into them, can actually be incredibly empowering for men.
That's interesting because, yeah, love is often painted as this soft, feminine quality, right?
Right.
Especially when you're talking about the red pill and things like strength and assertiveness.
Exactly.
So how does it square those two things? How do those two things work together?
It challenges that whole binary thinking completely.
Okay.
It argues that true masculinity isn't about rejecting love, but understanding its power, you know? And it even uses the story of the Good Samaritan.
Right, the guy who helps the injured traveler when everyone else is just walking by.
Exactly.
I don't know if I see the masculinity there. Help me out.
Think about it this way. So the Samaritan, he's demonstrating true strength.
Okay.
Not through social status.
Okay.
Not through, like, physical prowess or anything.
Right.
But through compassion.
Okay.
And a willingness to help somebody in need.
Okay.
Even defying social norms to do it.
Interesting.
It takes guts to do that.
So it's like real strength comes from a different place. It's not just about being a tough guy.
Exactly. It's about being a good man.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. And it goes a step further by connecting this to the Red Pill's emphasis on men being leaders.
Okay.
But it argues that true leadership isn't about dominance. It's about inspiring others.
Through your actions. Yeah.
Through compassion, through understanding.
Okay. I'm starting to see how they're kind of like weaving all this together here.
Yeah.
It's really interesting.
It all connects.
But what about the parables?
Yeah.
Because those always felt kind of like, you know, they're nice stories. They got a nice little moral at the end.
Right.
But not necessarily like sources of red pill wisdom.
Yeah. Well, the book challenges that as well.
Okay.
It suggests that the parables are actually full of this timeless wisdom.
Okay.
Practical life lessons that are still very much relevant.
So it's like Aesop's fables.
Kind of, yeah.
With a little bit more of a philosophical edge.
Exactly.
Okay, so like which ones, for example?
So it dives into several, including the prodigal son,
Okay.
the talents,
Right.
and of course we already talked about the Good Samaritan.
Okay, so the prodigal son, that's the one where the son like runs off and wastes all his money and then comes crawling back.
Exactly.
What kind of red-pilled wisdom can you glean from that?
Well, it's about taking responsibility for your choices,
Okay.
learning from your mistakes,
Okay.
choosing forgiveness over resentment.
Right.
And, you know, these are really essential lessons for personal growth, no matter who you are.
So it's not just about like a rebellious kid. It's about making choices and then dealing with what comes after.
Exactly. And dealing with the consequences. And then you got the parable of the talents.
Right. Where each servant is given a different amount of money to manage.
Exactly.
And the ones who invest it wisely, they're rewarded. And the one who buries it out of fear gets punished.
That's right.
It's like you get out what you put in. Right.
Yeah, on the surface.
Yeah.
But it's more than that.
Okay.
It's about maximizing your potential.
Okay.
Not letting fear hold you back.
So taking control of your own destiny and not letting opportunities pass you by.
Exactly. Exactly.
Interesting way to look at it.
It's all about action.
Right.
It's all about taking control.
Okay, and then the Good Samaritan we already talked about. What about, are there any others?
Yeah, there's a shorter parable, a parable of the lost coin.
Okay, I'm not familiar with that one.
It's about a woman who loses a coin.
Okay.
And she diligently searches for it.
Okay.
Until she finds it.
Okay.
And they use this to illustrate resourcefulness.
Okay.
And refusing to give up.
So being proactive and kind of like reclaiming what's yours.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Even when you're faced with setbacks, you don't give up.
Man, these parables, my mind is blown.
Deep stuff, right?
Deep stuff, deep stuff. But let's move on to something I think a lot of people, men in particular, really struggle with, and that's forgiveness.
Yeah.
Because it can feel like a sign of weakness.
Right.
Especially in a world that tells men, you know, be strong, be stoic.
Yeah, don't show weakness.
Right, exactly.
It's a common misconception, and they address that in the book.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
They argue that forgiveness isn't weak at all.
Yeah.
It's incredibly strong.
So how do they explain that?
Well, they actually go with a scientific approach.
Okay.
They cite studies that show forgiveness can improve your mental and physical health.
I didn't know there was science behind it.
Oh, yeah, there's studies on this.
Okay.
Things like reducing stress, improving your sleep. It can even boost your immune system.
Wow, I had no idea.
And then they connect this to personal growth.
Okay.
Arguing that forgiveness is really about releasing yourself from that anger and resentment.
So it's not about letting the other person off the hook. It's about freeing yourself from carrying that burden.
You said it perfectly.
Okay, interesting, interesting.
And this kind of leads into another concept, sacrifice.
Okay, this one's loaded, especially in this context.
Absolutely.
Because when you think sacrifice, you think about, you know, martyrs and saints.
Right, it's heavy stuff.
Yeah. So how do they deal with that?
So they actually critique the whole idea of infinite sacrifice.
Okay.
Which is often linked to Jesus. They're saying that focusing on the real, tangible sacrifices he made.
Okay.
Like his comfort, his social standing, and ultimately his life.
Right.
Is far more powerful.
So it's not this abstract concept of endless suffering. It's more about the actions and the motivations behind them.
Exactly, exactly. And then they connect this to the whole red pill philosophy, highlighting how sacrifice, when done for the right reasons, can lead to personal growth and a positive impact on the world.
I mean, that makes me think about like entrepreneurs who sacrifice for their businesses or parents who sacrifice for their children.
Of course.
You know, it's recognizing that sometimes you got to give something up to achieve something greater.
Exactly. Couldn't have said it better myself.
Okay, so we've talked about love, we've talked about sacrifice, forgiveness, but what happens when we die?
The big question.
Yeah, the ultimate unknown.
Right.
Does this red-pilled approach to Jesus's teachings have anything to say about the afterlife?
We'll get into that.
Okay.
Right after this.
All right, so we're back, and I gotta say, we've covered some heavy stuff.
Yeah, no doubt about it.
But now we're at like the ultimate question, right? What happens after we die?
The big mystery.
Does this whole red-pilled approach to Jesus's teachings have anything to say about the afterlife?
Well, it's interesting because the book doesn't shy away from that topic at all.
Right.
But instead of just giving you like, ooh, dogma,
right.
it kind of encourages you to look at the evidence and come to your own conclusions.
So no easy answers.
Not really, no.
Okay.
It starts by kind of diving into the historical context of the time when Jesus was alive.
Okay.
And pointing out that beliefs about the afterlife back then were all over the place.
Really?
Oh, yeah. I mean, you had reincarnation, you had paradise, you had oblivion, everything. It was a very different time.
So Jesus wasn't operating in a vacuum then. His teachings were influenced by what was going on around him.
Absolutely, absolutely.
That's interesting.
And then the book delves into some specific teachings, like the story of Lazarus being raised from the dead.
Right. That's a pretty powerful story about life after death.
It is, yeah. And the book acknowledges that.
Okay.
But it also encourages you to consider alternative interpretations.
Like what? Are we saying he didn't raise Lazarus?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
Some scholars see it as more of a symbolic story about spiritual resurrection through faith.
Okay.
Others have suggested maybe Lazarus was in a coma.
Right.
Not actually dead.
So it's about looking beyond the surface and not taking everything literally.
Exactly, yeah. Asking questions.
Which, again, that red pill mindset of critical thinking.
There you go.
Okay, I see.
Yeah.
But what about the science? Does the book go there?
It does touch on some modern theories about consciousness.
Okay.
The idea that maybe it's not limited to our physical bodies.
Okay.
It even gets into things like quantum physics.
Wow.
And the idea that maybe our brains are more like receivers for consciousness that exists separately.
So almost like science is catching up to some of these ancient ideas.
It's possible, right?
Yeah.
We still have a lot to learn.
Yeah, for sure.
About consciousness, about reality itself.
Absolutely.
It's a fascinating area of study.
Okay, so what's the final word then? What does the book say happens after we die?
Well, ultimately it kind of comes down to personal belief.
Okay.
It doesn't give you a definitive answer.
Okay.
But it does encourage you to do your research,
right,
weigh the evidence,
okay,
and come to your own conclusions.
So no blind faith?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
The book really stresses that no matter what you believe about the afterlife,
right,
Jesus' teachings can still offer you comfort, guidance in the face of death.
How so?
Well, it reminds you that he faced death with courage.
Right.
And his teachings can empower us to do the same.
So no matter what happens in the afterlife, those teachings can help us live better lives right now.
Exactly. They offer this timeless wisdom that helps us face our fears, find peace,
and live more meaningful lives.
Exactly.
Powerful stuff.
It is. It really is, regardless of your personal beliefs.
Well, that's a great note to end on.
Yeah.
As we wrap up this deep dive.
Deep dive, for sure.
What's the one thing you hope our listeners take away from this whole conversation?
You know, for me, it's just the importance of staying curious, questioning things, and always being open to learning more.
Right.
Even with ancient teachings, there's always new layers to uncover.
Absolutely.
And new ways to connect them to our lives.
I couldn't agree more.
It's a journey.
It's been a wild ride.
Yeah.
I've learned a ton.
Me too.
I feel like maybe this will even inspire some of our listeners to check out the book.
That would be great, yeah.
And kind of continue this exploration on their own.
Yeah, because as the book says, the journey doesn't end here.
Right.
The quest for knowledge is endless.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, hey, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into uncharted territory.
It's been my pleasure. Always fun to chat with you.
And everyone listening, we'll be back soon with another thought-provoking exploration.
Always a good time.
Until then, keep asking those big questions and never stop learning.